Joining me now is the former firearms officer, Harry Tanguy. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Kate. How are you?
Very well. Look, as we try and understand this story a little better, and there are gaps to fill, and there is an investigation underway, of course, from your initial perspective, what sort of action would lead a police officer to, for a man who is pinned down already, kick and stamp that person in the head?
I would say probably hearing your colleagues screaming on the radio. When you press the emergency button, it automatically stays on, and you can hear the person that you're having to deal with, the suspect, and your own shouts and screams, if that's the case. So I would well imagine that they've heard the female officer being punched or kicked in the face, broken nose, two other colleagues on the ground, and hospitalized to the extent. And this is a big step now. You don't fight armed officers, and as an armed officer, I would feel extremely exposed. I was only at one point was I on the ground grappling with someone, and I had a gun on me. And that's where you're sort of losing control, and it's almost as if they can do anything at that point. You are in imminent danger because you don't know who they are and you don't know what their intention is. Or whether they've just lost it and they're just going to shoot you or one of our family that is walking by trying to go to on holiday. Now, as you say, we don't know what the circumstances are. The footage I've seen starts about half a second before the foot strikes. I'm suspicious at that. I'd also like to see exactly what happened with the body-worn footage, and it'll all come to light. It's almost frustrating it doesn't come to light now, doesn't it? Like in America, so we can build a more wholesome picture really of the whole thing. Yes, it will surprise a few people. If you think there's huge amounts of adrenaline that are going in because they were big men. If you look on the video, they're quite big, they're tall, and they're resisting. And when I say resisting, some people think that means fighting. No, they were resisting. It's like I've been in that situation. They hunch their shoulders, strengthen their arms, and it's sort of that come and get me. I'm not coming quietly. And those officers, myself included, would know that, well, this is going to end up in a bundle. And I don't want to do that with a gun. Yes, they're on the ground. His hands are free. I don't know what's being said before. And we see the incident occurring. And I really don't want to comment on that at the moment until it's all over, because too many times people have commented and then regretted what they've said.
And we, really appreciate your expertise on this, Harry. Is it protocol to kick and stamp a person on the head if they are on the ground, if they're not confronting you, if they're in a position face down on the ground? Would that normally be appropriate action?
No, there's no protocol to do that, but there's Home Office approved techniques. But at the end of the day, if you're feeling that you or somebody else is in danger, you may use reasonable force, and that may be lethal, of course. It's whether that individual has seen a little bit of red mist or not, we don't know yet. What I must say, though, is with armed response in particular, you have to show so that you can almost frighten them away from trying to attack you and get your gun off you, because if you're evenly matched, you're underrepresented because your one hand's on your gun while you're fending people off or trying to arrest them. So you need to dominate, and that means aggressive, that means shouting, that means being quite rough with someone, pulling them onto the ground, domination. And because the result of that is not to have a good old bully session like someone might think. The result of that is because the end result is far less damaging than if you go in very softly and they end up having a fight with you and then a gun goes off. A little bit like the CS spray. It was a CS spray or the pepper spray, and then they grabbed the guy to pull him down. You can do it a distraction technique, and that might be a punch or a slap to distract them so that you can actually get the upper hand, and that avoids people getting seriously injured or killed. And with your report earlier about this cyst, no one's actually said whether this. I mean, I did a quick Google, so I'm not an expert. No one said if it's a cyst from previously that has been discovered due to a CT scan, or whether, because I don't think cysts are caused immediately. So that would be nice to get clarification on that. And I don't know if he's been particularly vague on that. I would like to say, sorry, Karen.
Well, it isn't conclusive. We know that doctors say, or their lawyer reports, that doctors say that the man has a cyst on his brain and that it is getting worse. But absolutely, we can't make that correlation. We can't be absolutely certain that the kicking and stamping on his head was the cause of the cyst on the brain. Absolutely fine to point that out. And I understand what you're saying about the fact that because that is a firearms officer, they are carrying a weapon. And so they sort of have to be even more assertive because they're carrying something dangerous. I mean, I've got lots of people, struggling with this as well. Harry, saying that the guy had his hands held. I mean, someone's written here, hands behind his head. I can't remember from seeing the footage whether the hands are behind the back or
by
behind
his
the head.
side.
Okay,
Yeah.
the hands are by his
Yeah.
side. But I think people struggle with the image of this, Harry, because the man appears to be already restrained.
Can I give you another side of this as
Yeah,
well?
go
So
on,
I'm
please
not
do.
saying should he have done that or should he have not. All right, I'm not going to say that because I'm not qualified. Otherwise, what's the point of an IOPC investigation? But what I'm saying is, as a police officer for 30 years, you're undermined. If you want to make your 30 years, you're being undermined, you're being baited, you're being attacked, you're being assaulted. You've just seen your female colleague. If you think of someone very close to you work with, and I'm sorry, female, it does make it worse. If a grown man punches her or kicks her in the face and she's got broken her nose, for a woman, it's quite horrendous. And then you're having to grapple with these people, and then you're thinking, well, this could carry on. The adrenaline is going to be up. And unfortunately, with everybody else, if everybody else messes up or makes a mistake or overreacts slightly, because I would very much doubt the results that are being shouted about because they're being particularly vague about it. And if they were, he also says
But
that
it's
the police didn't take
appropriateness
them.
of action, isn't it, Harry? Sorry to interject. And there'll be people screaming at the radio now, surely if you're a firearms officer, you are absolutely acutely trained to deal with a situation under stress, particularly because you are carrying a firearm. So that if your female colleague does suffer from a broken nose, that should not impede your judgment, should it?
No, and 99.9% of the time it doesn't. But when you're dealing with human beings, and that's why I hope this will be dealt with proportionately, and that we're not going to run away with a situation where some behaviour by some men that put 3 police officers in hospital suddenly doesn't matter anymore. That these 3 police officers are suddenly, they're so irrelevant. The people who punched them and put them in hospital are now considered victims. And now there's protests up saying how these poor people are being dealt with.
I should
I'm
say
sure
we
there's
don't.
more community that are upset about their actions in the first place.
And look, I want to point out we don't absolutely for sure know who was involved in the incident against the police officers. We don't know which of the men, if any of the men, that is the presumption that there has to be a reason why they're being apprehended by police. But again, we haven't got the full picture here. And I do understand what you're saying about seeing that incredibly, harsh incident, the incident of the stamping, seeing that alone does not give you all of the context. And that is, I suppose, what the police and the police watchdog need to be working out now. But you've offered us a really interesting and important perspective,